have you found yourself reflecting on those really tough moments when you thought, man, this is too hard, I can't do it anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore, and then you've pushed through?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am fortunate enough to have a lot of documentation from the early years and lots of video and lots of audio, lots of records that I've been on that I've done myself that I listen to, and I just at first it was difficult to listen to those things, and I still look at video and go, wow, I now I've gotten to the point where I am performing again. I'm comfortable with the way I am, and I've gotten myself to the point where I feel comfortable in what I can present as a musician is still has value.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to Recovery After Stroke, a podcast full of answers, advice, and practical tools for stroke survivors to help you take back your life after a stroke and build a stronger future. I'm your host, three-time stroke survivor, Bill Gassiamis. After my own life was turned upside down and I went from being an active father to being stuck in hospital, I knew if I wanted to get my life back to the one I loved before, my recovery was up to me. After years of researching and discovering, I learned how to heal my brain and rebuild a healthier and happier life than I ever dreamed possible. And now I've made it my mission to empower other stroke survivors like you to recover faster, achieve your goals, and take back the freedom you deserve. If you enjoy this episode and want more resources, accessible training, and hands-on support, check out my Recovery After Stroke membership community, created especially for stroke survivors and caregivers. This is your clear pathway to transform your symptoms, reduce your anxiety, and navigate your journey to recovery with confidence. Head to recoveryafterstroke.com to find out more after this podcast. But for now, let's dive right into today's episode. This is episode 168, and my guest today is the one and only Vinny Valentino. Vinny is a professional musician and plays the guitar for a living. And while playing on stage during a 2020 tour, Vinny experienced an ischemic and cryptogenic stroke.
Vinny Valentino, welcome to the podcast.
Man, it's really an honor to be here, and thank you for doing this. The whole thing, the Recovery After Stroke podcast has been a godsend for me, and I'm sure many other people.
Well, thank you for saying so. I really appreciate it. Is Vinny Valentino a stage name?
Actually, no, my name is Vincent. Uh, in Italian, it's Vincenzo. In Spanish, it's Vicente. So I answer to any and all of those versions of it.
Man, it's straight out of, that era, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Vinny Valentino sounds like you could have been a band member easy.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if my parents had this in mind when they picked that name, but that's what came of it anyway.
I love it. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you, man.
Well, you know, I have been a professional musician really all my life. I've been playing and making money at playing the guitar since I was 12 years old, and playing the guitar as early as the age 6. You know, and so as a result, you develop yourself, you do local gigs, and then eventually, hopefully, you'll go on tour and be if that's the kind of thing, many people teach. There's all kinds of avenues for professional musicians, and you have to be pliable to be able to make a living at this. Anyway, I was the type that occasionally went on tour, and I, ac- acquired this gig in 2004 with Steve Smith and Vital Information. And Steve Smith is, for those of you who don't know, he is the drummer for the rock band Journey, which, everybody knows, Don't Stop Believing and and all those hits. He was a big part of that. Um, anyway, but he has a jazz band, and I have been lucky enough to be involved in that band uh, since 2000, officially since 2006, but I've been playing with him since 2004. Um, Fast forward, I've played with many people along the way, and fast forward to 2020, we are preparing for a tour of Asia, and the pandemic starts to strike. We slowly lose all the dates that we had in China, obviously, and we had 2 weeks in China. We lost all those dates, and then we lost the week in Japan. We were going to be there as well, and what was left was flying out to the West Coast. And the West Coast, I mean Los Angeles, and then flying from there to your hometown of Melbourne, Melbourne, Australia. And but it wasn't to be for me because you know I was couple of three days into the tour. I developed symptoms, the night before I noticed anything happening, but basically I had a stroke on stage. And you know, that was the extent of it. I mean, I was in total denial, like a lot of people I've seen on your podcast. I kept telling you know, some good friends of mine came to see me play the last night that 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 we were at Catalina's. We were at Catalina's Jazz Club in Los Angeles, and Steve noticed something during the sound check. He he said, "What's going on?" And I said, I have no idea." And luckily, we had a pianist that was good enough to cover me on the musical places where I was, you know, not making it. Anyway, and this set went off okay. And after the set, they immediately started saying, "What's happening?" And I had some aphasia. I couldn't explain what I wanted to. I was incredibly emotional, as a matter of fact.
Mm.
I was crying like a little girl, and at times, uh, and we know now that that's a symptom of the stroke, but I was in total denial. I was telling my good friend who is the proprietor and promoter for the Drum Fantasy Camp. It's a world famous camp that goes on every year, which I've been the musical director for 15 years. And it's one of the most fun things that I do all year long. Anyway, he was in the audience and recording and doing some other things, and he noticed right away because I missed a meeting that I was supposed to have with him. And he said, "Well, wait a minute." He knew something was wrong right then and there when I missed the meeting. So talking to me backstage, he said, I'll never forget this. He said, "I think we should go to UCLA." I went, "What?" Yeah, I was in denial. I was not thinking stroke.
Mhm.
And he just kept pressing me. It took about an hour or two after the performance for those guys to convince me. And finally, Steve got his daughter on the phone, who said, you know, here are the 4 things that you need to think about. And if one of them, if you're having trouble speaking, then you need to go get it checked out right away. And she was adamant about it. And then it I finally said, okay. And went with Steve to the UCLA, which he is, I'm speaking of a different Steve now, but he stayed with me for a long time in the hospital and made sure I was set. They didn't. They evaluated me right away because he told them that he thought I had a stroke, and I said, "Man, no way." I looked at him. I said, "No way," and I told the doctor, "No, there's no way I had a stroke." And so I spent a couple hours in the waiting room there at UCLA because of that. The doctor evaluated me and didn't think that, it was possible that I had a stroke. He did some tests on me, and for whatever reason, I was able to disguise it pretty well. And anyway, finally, when they did the MRI on me, they got serious, and I got serious, and you know, it's been a hell of a journey ever since.
I can imagine, man. Where did you grow up? Where were you raised?
I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area in Northern Virginia.
Hmm. And I don't know what life was like back then, or what kind of a upbringing you had, but um, I'm going to pick up on a couple of things. You said you started crying like a little girl. It's interesting that you didn't say you started crying like a little boy, because maybe, I don't know, because I related to that immediately. And we're not disparaging anybody here, and we're not giving anyone a hard time. And it's not a problem to cry like a little girl. But it's interesting that we say that, even because little boys are told not to cry. We're told not to be emotional, not to
Right.
tough it out, don't cry, you'll be right. Um, and it's interesting, we can't, even in our words, express it as I cried like a little boy. Little girls are told to fight like a boy, stop hitting like a girl. Like, girls are told, stop hitting like a girl, be a boy. And we're talking about crying, and we're talking, comparing ourselves to girls. It's a really bizarre part of our vocabulary and our conversation as humans. I just think it's strange. Um, and of course, during stroke, nobody knows what's going on when their emotions kick in. But the way I described it was my head switched off, so something else did have to come back online, and it was my heart for the first time in 37 years. Came online, and it
That's
was expressing itself.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to look at it. I can relate.
And it's picking up the slack where the head can't do much of the work anymore. Like, the heart's picking up the slack and going, let me intervene here, and let me support out, or I'll help out, and let me express in a different way what's really going on for this person. It's more than just a cognitive thing that we need to make sense of. This is an emotional thing as well. We are afraid, we're concerned for our family, our friends, ourselves, our future. We're concerned all about that stuff, and that's the heart kicking in for me and going, you know cry a little bit, man. I think you need to get this out and get it off your chest, and show people what's going on inside, not just because you look good on the outside, pretend that everything is okay. That's kind of how I read into it.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think. And I mean, plus there was a little bit of fear that I knew that if I went to the hospital and went through the process of getting checked out, I probably wouldn't make the flight, which was 24 hours from then, the next day, to Australia, and I wouldn't be able to finish the tour. And I come from the mindset, you get up on stage and you perform at all cost, and my father taught me that. And my brother was adamant about that too. And I remember playing when I had the um, when I was 16 years old and could barely get on straight stage because I was sick. And
Show
but
must go
the
on.
show must go on,
Yeah.
as they say.
You creative types of musicians and people in theatre and all that kind of stuff. I mean, under no circumstances do they not want to perform, and that's interesting and strange all at the same time, because there's got to be an opportunity for people to go, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to do it today, or I can't do it today, or I want to have a rest, bring somebody else in. It seems to be this, under no circumstances do you not put the show on. And I feel that's such a real tough space to hang around in, because mentally, if somebody is doing it tough, you can see that that might lead to, especially in rock bands, substance abuse of every kind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that world was definitely swimming all around, and I knew enough to stay away from that. My parents were really strong influence in that way. My dad was like, "Hey, don't get involved in the things that will bring you down."
Mm.
And that is alcohol, drugs, and women. you know, he's like, and this was early on, and he said, look, these things will, and I don't mean to say that women in general, but the idea of playing that field the way you see rock musicians and rock stars, have a different girl every night. And he's like, don't get involved in that.
Yeah.
That's not you. Be a stronger person. And that stayed with me.
When you finally convinced that you've had a stroke and you need to spend some time in hospital, what was that like? How long did you spend in hospital?
I spent 3 days of extensive tests because um, I had what they call a cryptogenic stroke, meaning that they don't know what caused it. They have some theories, and none of them really match up. COVID is even a theory, but it, the point is that they couldn't find a direct correlation to the type of stroke I had, and I had a stroke deep in the basal ganglia. Um, so they ran every test, and they were determined to find out what was going on. They tried this, they tried that, and literally I have you know UCLA was absolutely great in that they tried every angle they could think possible, and at the end of it they said, we're gonna let you go and get you home, um, and when you get home, go see your doctor and proceed with the rehab therapy, um,
Mhm.
which was completely shut down because this was March 8th, March 9th. And I am fortunate enough, fortunate enough, geez,
Got it.
to have my father-in-law is a retired physician. So he was actually the first call that I made in the hospital before calling my wife, and and he pretty much told me exactly what had happened, and he advised me how to proceed, which is, you know, which was great. So anyway, I get home, I I see my doctor at home. He has some theories. They run some tests and they send me to a neurologist at home. He also looked at everything that UCLA did and says, we don't really know. We have some theories. We want you to see a cardiologist. So I saw the cardiologist. He did some additional studies on me, including a transesophageal echo where they look at uh, your heart in detail. Um, and he said he couldn't see anything there. And so basically, we still don't know.
Yeah. So you're were you living is your family living in DC?
No, I'm living in New York. I moved to New York about 23, 22 years ago. I
Ah,
moved just outside of New York City um,
that explains the
to
accent.
to pursue the to pursue the musical career, which has developed accordingly.
Yeah, so the family's in New York City and you're in California. So you're telling the family from California that I've fallen ill and I'm in hospital and this is the situation. How'd that go down?
Uh, Not too well because my my wife was dealing with our kids and uh at the same time COVID-19 is blowing up all around us.
Mm.
So normally she would have jumped on a plane, uh you know somebody would have been there, but she couldn't. She couldn't risk getting on a plane and catching this horrific pandemic illness and not being there for the kids. So I told her, "Don't worry, stay at home," and all kinds of things were swimming around, and we just did the most practical thing, which was my brother and my mother live in Los Angeles. No, they live in Las Vegas. My brother immediately got in a car and drove to UCLA, which is in Los Angeles. He met me there at the hospital, and within I think it was 13 hours or so, he was able to get to the to get to me, and shortly thereafter, my mother and my sister came to the hospital as well. I went from Los Angeles, UCLA to back to Las Vegas with my brother and stayed at my mother's house for a couple of days until I was strong enough. And then my sister flew with me home to back to the New York City area.
Wow, that's a serious effort from everybody to get you from this state that you were in back to home at some point. And
Yeah.
then, and then you're at home, and what happens there? Are you uh, settling back at home? Like, how's the recovery coming along? What were you impacted by? What what were you left with?
Well, mainly it was, I mean, my right side is impacted because I had the stroke on the left side. Um, so there were some strength issues on my right side, but they were relatively minor. The big issues were my speech, which still, is not quite fluent, uh, and mainly it affected my playing because for some reason it really set me back. As a matter of fact, I've documented most of it, and this is kind of 2 months after I had the stroke, I um, went up on Instagram and started posting my recovery and efforts to recover. Uh, uh, because I heard that that COVID was causing strokes, and I thought that posting this stuff would help somebody else. It was mainly a chronological event, and that's the way I looked at it. I could help other people by posting this stuff.
Yeah.
And so as a result, pretty much 2 months into it, you can see me struggling to play exercises that I've played all my life, and songs that I wrote, I couldn't play. And it so then my wife took on the therapy role because for a month I couldn't get therapy, that everything was closed down. My wife looked up, and she tried every angle, got some advice from different people, and I was just doing what I could with her. Um, all the while playing every day, trying to get it back. And I got to say, after 50 years with the guitar in my hand, you know, I was just I was just kind of getting to the point where I liked what I was playing. After 50 years of playing, I felt like, I could go into the studio and play the type of solos that I wanted, the way that I wanted to, and I could communicate well on the instrument. And then, you know, the stroke.
And now you've got to go one level deeper, my friend.
It's it was a rude awakening, as they say.
Yeah. So when you say it's difficult to play, try and explain what that means. So what I did when I've always liked the ukulele, but I never played guitar or any instrument. I don't know a thing about music. And believe it or not, when I was in Fiji 1 year in 2005, and then when I was in Hawaii in 2013, um, both times I bought a ukulele. I don't know how to play it or what to do with it, but I just bought one. And I took one of them to, um, in 2015, I took one of them to a ukulele teacher to teach me how to play. And I figured I would use my affected hand, my left hand. I'm left. I'm not sure. Is it if I'm using my left hand to play the strings? Am I left-handed or right-handed?
You would be right-handed.
Okay. So I'm right-handed using the left hand to strum or to hold the strings in notes. And I thought it would be a good idea to learn how to play and also retrain my hand, which I have deficits on my left hand, feeling deficits and movement deficits and coordination deficits. It didn't last too long because I think my teacher wasn't the best for me and I wasn't understanding of what I needed to do. And it was really early in my recovery. So there was a lot going on and maybe it was a good idea, but it wasn't the right timing. So I don't understand because I've never played before. I don't understand what I was missing or what I wasn't doing well or what's happening for you. Is it clear up here what your fingers need to do, or is it an issue with your fingers, or do your fingers know what to do, but you, up here can't do it? Like, what's happening?
Well, I would say that it's a little of both. More so on the right hand than on the left. But I would say over the course of, since this happened, I have tried to analyze whether this is a cognitive thing or whether it's a physical thing. And I've always, run into, I mean, as a musician, you run into hurdles constantly. You constantly get to the point where you can't do certain things and you practice your way through them. And that's the way you approach everything, a piece of music, anything, and I would say I had just done a record with a big band where I played some of the most difficult music in my career. And Vital Information is an intense band where we play really difficult stuff. But that and I just approach it one step at a time to get to the point where I could play that. As a matter of fact, when I got the call for that gig, I don't know if you know him or not, but Frank Gambale used to play. He's Australian, which is why I asked you. And Frank Gambale is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. And I was asked to step into his shoes, and listening to him on these records to learn the music. I was on tour in Russia at the time. Anyway, you just practice enough. You just practice way more than you should, so that when you perform and things aren't right, you can still manage to get in, and perform and get to that point. So I've always practiced my way out of situations or
Mm.
into situations.
Mhm.
So, but this was different. The stroke is different. I would say that my therapists, all of them, including physical, cognitive, and uh, the occupational therapists, were absolute rock stars. They tried every angle and didn't give up to the point, that my insurance would cover it. Now, with I tried everything. I mean, I'll give you a couple examples. I read one book that was talking about um, walking to a metronome, and
Mhm.
of course, in music, we use a metronome.
Mm.
So I thought, what if I walk to a metronome, keep that tempo, my legs at going at that tempo, and try to play a piece of music, or at least keep time rhythmically with my right hand, because that was extremely difficult for me. So I did things like that, and started really, really slowly and worked up to the point where I could do it. And again, that's, video of this is on Instagram. You can see me going through the process. And then my therapist came up with another idea where I was playing scales on the guitar and could do them at the tempo that I could do it at, and then would pay attention to a light board and would have to manipulate the light board with my feet. So this is what's happening during improvised solos and jazz in general, is multiple things are going on in the brain. So she would try to emulate that. And at some point I had trouble holding the pick in my hand, and I still do. It's gotten a lot better, but um, so we came up with this idea. I put this leather driving glove on, and in the leather glove, I put magnets in different places on my fingers, so that the glove had weights on it. So it was like resistance, and I could move that resistance around to fit my needs. And I practiced with that for 2 months. At first, people saw that on Instagram. They said, "Vinny, you're gonna hurt yourself. Don't do that." And but it was just again trying to practice through it. The concept of practicing through it.
Yeah, right, man. So your 50 years of playing would have a lot of examples of when shit got real, things got tough,
Yeah.
and things intervened in your ability to be on stage, play on stage, to be good at what you do, to enjoy it. And this is very different. You've never experienced this before, but it's a challenge that you're faced with, and you're going to have to try at some point, to push through and overcome. And the only place you can go back to have a reference point for when you did that was some other struggle in your life that you've been through, because you've been through 50 years of life or more, and this tough times. So
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
have you found yourself reflecting on those really tough moments when you thought, man, this is too hard, I can't do it anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore, and then you've pushed through? Have you found yourself doing that, looking back?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am fortunate enough to have uh, a lot of documentation from the early years, and lots of video and lots of audio, lots of records that I've been on, that I've done myself, that I listen to, and I just you know at first it was kind of difficult to listen to those things, and I still I still look at video and go, wow, I
I was all right.
yeah, and but 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 now I've gotten to the point where I am performing again, and I'm comfortable. I am my As a good friend of mine says, I am authentic with the way I am.
Mhm.
And I've gotten myself to the point where I feel comfortable in what I can present as a musician is still has value. It hasn't gotten back to the way that I was before, but it may never get back there. I'm okay with that.
Mm.
But I don't want to lose the improvisational aspect of what I spent years to develop. And you
I,
know,
I love that. I love that you're comfortable playing with the imperfections in your music now, that you actually have almost, for right now, no choice to live with and play with. Because I imagine that musicians are really anal and want to make it perfect every single time.
yeah,
And now you can't. And now it's either, play the way I can, or don't play at all. And it's like, why would you not play at all when it gives so much joy to you and other people? It's it's that, this is the other layer. You got to let go of certain things, Vinny. You got to let go of perfection. You got to let play of this beautiful thing that you were doing just before the stroke, and you just got to play within your new parameters. And that's what people don't realize about how to live life after stroke. They don't realize that they've got new parameters set by external forces, got nothing to do with us. But if we live within those parameters, we can sometimes, skirt around the edges of them, but we can actually still live a pretty full life within the new parameters that were being set, right? And that's how music is, you know. I remember, and I've got no idea who this was, and I can't credit anyone for it, so I don't know who it is. There was this artist who did some really fine, detailed work with pencils, and they would draw these sketches, and it would be an immaculate looking pencil drawing of a landscape or whatever it was, a person. And because there was so much detail, they would spend a lot of time focusing and practicing to be extremely still and do these really minor micro movements, you know, just to take it to the next level. We're talking
Right.
about perfection to the next level. Like, I mean, you couldn't even imagine it. And then, unfortunately, this artist, what happened was they started to get a tremor in their hand, in their drawing hand. So you can imagine now that the whole idea of what their life had evolved to and become to be this person who creates these immaculate images by penciling these micro lines that you can hardly see into a spot to create this perfect image, now is not possible. And I remember listening to that and or reading that and not, you know, being in a situation where I could reach out to this person, let them know. But I wondered if at all they ever considered the possibility that what if now they just um, embraced the tremor and
Right.
delivered their work with this new level of, I don't know what, you know, like, but from the point of view of an evolution of of an artist from this perfection thing to this other version of perfection that includes a tremor. And I reckon it would have made for such a compelling story, and the value of that art would have been just as much valuable or more because of what it's saying and what it's describing, and you know how it shows the humans transition from one stage in life to this other stage. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I would say that it's very difficult because potentially, just like with me, there's documentation of what you had done and what you and the concept is you can see what you have done, and that represents it's almost like two people
Hmm.
because now the artist with the tremor, you know, could be as valid as the artist without the tremor, but it's a different person. You know, it's well, not necessarily a different person. It's just a you see what I'm saying?
The
You
identity has
and
shifted, and you need to kind of upgrade and get to that stage and move to that stage, start changing your thinking, your feeling, everything around it. I get it, right? It's the thing about it is, you know, for lack of a better way to describe this, and don't take this the wrong way, like say somebody or you thought you were a shit musician now, that would be a travesty. All of your ideas for how to be a true musician, like developed over the last 15 years, you have all of that still, and you just have this new method by which you strum the guitar, or you pick the string, or you hold the neck. And it's like the information about how to put music together and write that and create that and deliver it doesn't go away because your hand won't strum the way that it used to strum. Perhaps this is a new identity to shift into and to move into and sort of create this space of what can I do with this new gift that I have, that and use that old information to enhance this new gift, you know, to take it to the next level.
yeah, I like that, and you know, we're our own worst enemies
Mm,
because with me, you know, I've got all of course all kinds of things swimming around in my head, but
mm,
um I would get together, I would force myself to get together with some of the greatest guitar players in the world from all over the world on a Zoom during the pandemic because we weren't working.
Mm,
So we could have a laugh and it's amazing that every one of them have gone through some type of struggle that has made them what they are. And none of those guys took the approach of, you know, I'm not going to do it anymore. They persevered through it. And they never thought they never thought of me as, because there comes a point where you realize it anyway. It's I'm beyond that now, but at some point you have so much anger, or at
mm,
least I did, and that this has been taken away,
mm.
that you just don't want to continue. Maybe I'll go on and do something else. I'll be a plumber or whatever. It crossed my mind. But the musicians that I've been surrounded by didn't take no for an answer. They were like, you know, a bass player that I play with weekly since the beginning. He's like, look, you're I've seen the development. I've seen you get better. And this pianist, and all these musicians are giving me the feedback like it's just a bump in the road. You got to get through it.
Yeah,
Don't look at it like anything beyond that.
yeah. Um, the the audience is so forgiving. They wouldn't care if you missed a string or a note or whatever, would they? I mean, they're just there to see Vinny Valentino play and the rest of the band, and they're like, man, I'm seeing them play. And if they fail to hit every note, it's like, whoa, that's a relief, like I don't have to be that good, or I don't have to worry about me missing a string or a note. And it's like, if we could be our greatest fan instead of our greatest critic,
Yeah,
then we'd have a better experience in this shitty time.
yeah, you're so right. Yeah.
That's what I get.
So
Like when I'm hard on myself, man, nothing works. When I just let go and just let everything happen, things work. I'm writing a book. I haven't written for a month, Vinny. It's on my mind every day. But in the space that I've been in for the last month, there's no way that I can sit and write anything and make it legible and make it the way that I want it to be. So I'm not going to do it at that time. I have to be in the right headspace. And at one point I was a bit harsh on myself at the beginning, when I I wondered whether I'll get my brain back when I took it for granted, when it was that good and I took it for granted and did stupid things instead of smart things. And then when I wondered, am I ever going to get my brain back? I was like, I might not get it back. Like it might not be the way that it always was. And I'm going to have to live with not making the most of it until the age of 37. And now I've got to do this new version of it. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen. And now my brain is back and I'm healed, but it's not the same. And it needs me to rest at different stages. And by the mid afternoon, I'm pretty much done if it's anything to do with cognitive stuff and, computer work and all that type of thing. So I've got to make the most of the mornings. If I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 and I can't get back to bed, I'm better off getting out of bed, doing 2 or 3 hours of stuff that I need to get done before 8 or 9 o'clock, and then feeling really accomplished, like I've done a whole heap of things, and then ease into the rest of my day and go, oh, okay, it's 2 o'clock. I'm done for the day. I can't do anymore. I'm not doing anymore. And then I just ease into my night. So that's they're the parameters I was talking about before. The parameters have changed. I can't get those ones back. I'm going to work within these ones. And that served me, it served me pretty well, but it's not easy. I'm not saying that, it's just going to happen.
no, yeah, and I'm sure you're like me. I've watched TED Talks and listen to podcasts and listen to neurologists about this and neuroscientists about this. And one thing that I read this actually before the stroke, that we don't get enough sleep in general
Mhm.
as humans, and especially on the East Coast of the United States. We just don't get enough sleep, and
Mm.
uh, where the industry standard used to be 8 hours, we dream about 8 hours. This neuroscientist is saying, no, we actually would do better with something like 9 hours of sleep. Well, if you can get 9 hours of sleep and have a working life with family, all the more power to you. But I have tried to position myself and change around that concept that, you know, and sleep is no longer optional.
No, man. And I know that musicians don't sleep when everyone else sleeps, and that makes sense, right? Look, sleep is it's like a it's the best thing you could do, like literally, along with nutrition and sleep. You get those two things. Just if you get them 80% right, you're doing so much better. Because
Yeah,
at night, when you sleep, it's when the brain actually shrinks in size to allow cerebrospinal fluid through all the cells to wash it out and clean it up and detoxify it and
right.
get rid of all that stuff. And then what that does is create healing, and that creates new neurons and new memories and new pathways, and it allows them to solidify and become permanent in your brain, right? And if you're trying to do problem solving on a couple of bad nights sleep, you're going to do less problem solving on a bad night's sleep. And when you're in the middle of stroke recovery and all you have to do is solve problems, you need to have a clarity of mind, and you need to not be impacting on the negative aspects of the stroke that you're causing, or you're interfering with your recovery by not sleeping and not eating appropriately. So if you can pick up sleep anywhere at any time of the day, it's really, really important. I was doing, little cat naps at midday, and I was doing early night sleeping. Even if I go to bed and don't sleep, I just have a really dim light on, and I might listen to a meditation or a podcast or something in the background. And then that lying down, even though it's not sleeping, really starts to sort of help settle me into uh, a decent night's sleep. And meditation before bed, a night meditation before bed, really does help to calm you and put you into a good rhythm. And you know about uh, binaural beats.
Yeah, uh, I do know a little bit about that. I have tried that too. What I find is, at least for me, that I'm paying too much attention to the beats and to the musical aspects of them, and my brain won't shut off with that. What I actually found useful is listening to comedians. Just listen to comedians go on,
Even that's good.
and that will put me to sleep, believe it or not. I mean, I'll get a chuckle in here and there,
Yeah.
eventually I'll be relaxed enough to fall asleep.
Well, that makes sense that you would be paying attention to the music and to the way that that's been produced or structured or put together.
Yeah,
That makes complete sense. It would be stimulating you instead of putting you to sleep.
exactly. Yeah, I because that was recommended to me by a few people, and I immediately, put that to use. And I'm like, wait a minute, I feel more awake now than I did before. And you know, after an hour of listening to that stuff, but I realized that I was analyzing tempos and beats and even when I'm listening to music, because really what I like to do is go to bed listening to Keith Jarrett or George Benson or somebody that, you know, some inspiration,
Mhm.
Wes Montgomery, and and those I find myself no, because I'm paying way too much attention
Mm.
to what they're doing and how am I going to do that the next day, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I get it. It's not chilling you out, it's getting you all energized.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. So if you're a musician and you're away from home a lot, the family is on the other side of the country, or you're on the other side of the planet. Um, how often were you away, and what sort of amount of time would you spend away from home?
Well, 2020 looked to be uh, a very busy year, and 2019 was too, but I usually don't go away for more than 3 weeks at a time, um, but there was a lot of touring that just lined up. You know, when you're out, you wanna try to line up as much as you can because that's when you obviously, when promoters can string together dates, you can make the most money that way. They don't have to bring you out on this flight and that flight and hotels and et cetera. So, it makes the most sense, but I limit my activity to this one band, actually to Steve Smith and and a project, 2 projects that he's involved in. One of them is Vital Information, and the other one is a organ trio project that we started. Uh, and those 2 bands tour about 3 weeks a year, sometimes more. You know, there might be some touring in during the festival season, and I've done that with the organ trio and but usually I'm not gone that much.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not like it's I've purposely turned down those type of gigs that would keep me out 150,
Mm,
200 days a year. I've now there's, monetary things that that play into it as well, but I feel strongly that my family comes first.
yeah, I love it. So when you're how old are the kids?
I've got a range from 9 to 19.
Yeah. And how do they cope seeing dad not himself?
You know, um, my the young ones seem to be okay with it, although, I could and I don't know if this is true, but I continue to play chess with with my 13-year-old, and I taught him to play at, an age where I could pretty much beat him regularly, or at least upper hand. I'd make a mistake every once in a while. He'd win every once in a while. But now and since the stroke, it's convenient to blame it on the stroke.
Love it.
I haven't I can't hold a candle to him unless he makes uh unless he blunders. There's no way I can hold a candle to his capabilities and uh, you know, in his defense, he's really studying the game. He studies it like I studied the guitar. He, s plays it for hours every day. So, uh, you can't keep up with somebody at that level, even though he is quite a bit younger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my other 2 are older, so I think, they've, come to accept it and seen the progress that I've made. and just see it as a bump in the road.
Yeah. You've got to be a good example to kids to show them that when the shit hits the fan for them at some point in their life, hopefully really, really long way down the journey, uh, that they've got an example for how you go about recovering and overcoming shit and persevering and pushing through with whatever life throws at you. You know, that's, I think, what I'm learning is that's my role more than anything to my kids now,
Yeah.
especially that they're 25 and 21. You know, it's not really about anything else. It's just about showing them, okay, being kind of like a clairvoyant for them and showing them the future, right? Like, guys, this is where you're going to get at some point, and there's one way to go about overcoming that or battling through it or
Yeah.
getting better than you were before. You know, with the 13-year-old, I love the dad move. You know, teach him how to play, but not too much, so that I could beat him, and just let him know who's boss. You know, just hey, you know, I taught you, I'm the boss. But isn't interesting how the mantle has been handed over, and now, you know, he's fascinated by it and studying it to that point where he's getting better and better at it, and you're sort of dealing with stroke and other things, but at the same time, you know, it's time the master has to kind of bow down and, you know, accept the apprentice is up and coming, you know.
Yeah.
But
It's
what's
exactly.
really interesting about what you do, Vinny, is you're doing a lot of things that a neurologist would love. Like, you would be the neurologist's best patient, because everything you do is challenging the brain in a lot of different ways, and it's keeping the brain fresh and active and growing new neural pathways, and you have a lot of good habits around that. And playing, obviously, the guitar is one of those things, because you have to actually know cognitively each note and when it's time for it, like when it comes, and the timing, the amount of time, you know, between each note, and when not to do a note, and all those things. But then once you've learnt it, you have to forget about everything you've learned, and then you've just got to do it
You
without
just gotta,
thinking about it,
yeah,
right? So you have to
yeah,
switch the brain off, and you just got to go into flow, and you got to do it. Chess is a strategy game, and you have to be thinking X amount of steps ahead, and always forever wondering, if he does that, I've got to do that, and then if I do that and he does that, I've got to do that, and then that is doing all the things that you need to be doing to support real good neural health and real good habits around growing new neural structures and brain cells and neurons and all that kind of stuff. And also, what comes with that is a spike, I imagine, when you have a really good move on the board, comes with a spike of dopamine. You know, you get a bit of a dopamine rush, you know, pleasure. Whoa, you know, then you play a
yeah,
really good track, and that song creates real massive amounts of dopamine. So all of that stuff is creating the right environment for healing to happen really rapidly, and to make new memories sort of become cemented in place, so that you can go back to that space easier next time. Does that feel kind of, am I on the right path there? Is that what's happening for you? Is that how
that's,
you feel it working?
yeah, absolutely. And my therapist used to joke about this, but you know, I took a very systematic approach to therapy and recovery because that's the way I learned from my father, and you know, that's the way to deal with things. My teachers, you know, my my first real guitar teacher was when I was 16 years old, and he taught me, take a systematic approach to it, step by step, slowly first before you speed things up, and you will get there. It's just a matter of time. And back then we think, oh, we've got all the time in the world. It's a little different now, but it's the same practice and same concept. One of the things that I did as part of getting myself back together was develop an app for guitar players called the Super 7-Minute Guitar Workout. And it's available on, Google and Android devices and Apple devices, but it's a documentation with beginning with a really simple exercise to more advanced stuff, and doing that over a period of 7 minutes every day, you will have results, no matter the tempo. It's not about playing it fast. It's about playing it accurately. And so I put together this concept, and it went along with my therapy. And my therapists were like, wow, you're actually, and I said, and I was doing the videos while I was doing therapy, and it was all part of the therapy. I looked at it as part of the therapy and part of the way I was going to come back. And now we have an app that's available to the world that doesn't matter the level. You can get something out of it. And it's like the 7-minute workout, that concept of interval training for athletes, or for anybody that wants to work out, that concept on the guitar.
So what I love about it is every time you've said something like today, I've done a Google search, I've looked at it, I've looked it up. What I love about it is it's your way of doing therapy. That's what I like about it. So often we go into the therapist's rooms and we do their version of therapy, and that's kind of not enough for some people, because if you don't relate to it or you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. I'm never going to do guitar therapy, really. There's no chance. But if I was asked what I wanted to do in therapy, that would really make a big difference, And one of the things that I did when I was learning to coordinate my left hand and move it properly was I played on the Wii, on the Nintendo Wii, I played tennis, and you hold the Wii controller and you play tennis. And I've never played tennis before, but the ball's not actually coming to you, so it doesn't feel that dangerous,
Right.
And you don't have to run far. So I was doing the whole tennis, striking this ball, this pretend ball in VR, and it was really useful. It was working. I was working up a sweat, but I wasn't at risk of falling and hurting myself and doing anything that was going to be detrimental to me. So it was enjoyable, and I didn't realize that was going to be part of therapy. But they asked me, what kind of therapy would you like? These are the options that we have available, and then I chose the ones that I was going to relate to. And I just love how you've gone about this. It's related to the thing that you're really good at, the thing you've done your whole life, the thing you're passionate about. And that's going to motivate somebody to heal and recover better than me telling you to come and do therapy my way. You're going to say, well, Bill, that's good for you, man, but it's not for me.
Well, one of the things that I learned from listening to your podcast is that every stroke is different. It's like it's like trying to put humans into a mold. You can't do it. Everyone is different. Every stroke is different too. There might be some similarities in the difficulties that we have to do, but I can recall certain podcasts and certain people. The guy that was the bartender that was on that that ended up on stage, and the girl that lives in Las Vegas that was, high up on in this corporate world. I can recall the things that they said, and make that a part of what is good for me. What can I take away from it? And
Yeah.
it- and that's the whole reason that I posted my progress on Instagram. And I have to say that I've been lacking in the past few months, but I'll start getting back out there and posting it again.
Yeah, I get really prolific at some point as well. I put a lot of stuff out and then I can't, and I just don't. And you see the downloads, they go down and all that kind of stuff goes down and it changes. And it's like, well, whatever. I can't push this all day, every day. I run out of energy and I'm not doing it for, um, I'm not doing it for the purpose of having it out there for everybody all the time. I'm doing it for me,
Yeah,
partly, and for them as well. And if I've got to look after my health, I've got to look after my health, whether it's my mental health or my physical health or my emotional health. I'm doing that first. I'm not looking after you before I'm looking after me. I've got a lot of
right.
needs as well, and that's important. Mike Shutt, who was on episode 161, you
Yeah,
know, he was a classic do everything for everybody else kind of guy. And at some point he said, well, I can't do that anymore. I've got to look after myself. And he put out, he went back to his roots and what he loves, which was theater, and he did a one-man show. That podcast is just amazing, man. It's so well produced, the sound effects, like everything about it. I imagine I'm listening to it and I'm like, no, I'm actually there. Like I didn't feel the difference between listening to it and being in the crowd. Um, and then Christina DeVille, she's just a workaholic. She just works all day, every day, episode 160. And she's really good at what she does. But what that did was that alienated her from other aspects of her life. And she started to find balance now in work and in her personal life. And what's really cool is her work is pushing her back, is pushing her away and saying to her, enough, stop, do less, or we got this covered, or you don't need to worry about that, or, they're really picking up the slack for her and they're supporting her in that way. And she doesn't know what to do with that. She's like, well, what do you mean? I've got I used to be able to do this and I used to be able to
yeah,
perform at this level. Similar to you, hers, it's a performance. It's still work. It's work, but it's a performance. She's performing for somebody, whether it's herself or her boss or her employees or the clients. She's doing what you're doing. She's traveling the state, so she's traveling the country, and she's performing for somebody. And now she's got to perform in these new parameters that have been set for her. And everyone's finding their way, man. No one has done this before, so they don't know what the
that's
hell they're doing.
that's right.
And they're just finding their feet again, and they're relearning everything, and they're gonna get there. But it's just brand new, and you're early on in the process, and I'm nearly 10 years. February will be 10 years in my process, and
That's
it gets easier.
that's amazing.
It
10
does,
years, huh?
yeah, like that, man. It just flew. It gets easier. It's still hard, but it gets easier. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not
Yeah,
simple. And sometimes I don't like waking up and not being able to feel my foot. And sometimes I don't enjoy that my balance is affected. And sometimes I don't enjoy that I can't stay up at late at night to go and see a show or to do that kind of stuff. But that's only sometimes. A lot of the times I'm all right with most of it, even though it's not always ideal.
yeah, yeah. You're it's the authentic you. It's
Yeah, I don't
it's
talk shit now. That's not, nobody gets the yeah. No, I'll push through. Yeah, I'll be right. Or yeah, all right, let's do that. Man, they don't get
Yeah.
that anymore. They just get what has to happen is, dude, I'm out. That's it. Catch you later. Enjoy your night.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's refreshing in a way. Maybe that would have come to me with time as well, and age, more age, right? But there was still an amount of, what's the word? Maybe it's pressure or peer pressure or whatever it was to do stuff for people, And it comes from my training. I have a property maintenance business, so it comes from my training of always making things happen for my clients. Whoever said they needed something done, I was always yes. But now I'm at that point where yes for them means no for me somewhere, and I don't
Yeah.
like that. I don't like that.
Yeah. Do you find that in doing these podcasts, I mean, I have to imagine that you learned so much. Just you've done 164, I think, or more,
Yes.
165.
165 that are live. And I've got 3 in the can, so there's about 168 or 69 at the moment.
Yeah, and I just listened to the cardiologist that you had on.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I bought his book. He is very interesting, but I can imagine through the process, has the process of this podcast has helped you in a way that um, not only interviewing the individual or the people that have had these incidents, but also being able to tell your story and how it's come up, you know, uh, what you've done at this point in your journey.
Yeah. I, my upbringing was really cool in that ideal upbringing. No dramas in life. Everything was pretty much perfect. My parents are amazing. They come from a Greek background, and their ideas are a little bit still 1960s Greece. But they had a different role to fulfill in life, which was, to raise their family. They were raising their family after the war. So they needed to, and they were born after the war. So they needed to have this mindset that their parents, gave them, which was about, keep your family close, work hard, save your money, and that kind of stuff. And that didn't really fit me. It didn't really work for me. It was great in idyllic, but I always wanted more. I always tried to strive, and I always felt like I had a lot to say and nobody would listen. And I always had the wrong audience, I suppose. And it really frustrated me as a kid. I felt like nobody understood me. I felt like 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 the black sheep in the family. Like I had no idea where I fit in and what my role was in the world. And I did stuff that my dad made me do. Not that he forced me, but that they entrained me to do, which was work a shitty job and work it for a long time and all that kind of stuff. And I had the creative outlet and I had the gift of the gab, and I had nowhere to, nothing to do with it because I didn't feel like I had a compelling story or anything worth sharing that was relevant or important. And then what I got curious about was how to progress my recovery and how to take responsibility for certain things, because I always appreciated taking responsibility for my situation, whatever it was, even though if I had caused it and I didn't know what I was doing. If somebody pointed out to me, I never got offended when somebody said you're doing a shit job of something. I always thought, oh, okay, why am I doing a shit job? What is he seeing that I'm not?
Yeah.
So when I started to learn about how to help myself and recover better, I started sharing it with people and found myself like, I've got a lot of good information. You should know this. You're a stroke survivor. Let me tell you this. You need to hear about it. But it fell on deaf ears at the beginning because I chose the wrong audience again. The wrong people weren't interested to hear. And I made some enemies. People disliked me for sharing stuff that I'd learned that helped me in my recovery. They hated me for that. And I was like, oh, I've misjudged this. I didn't know how, but I misjudged it. So then I thought, stuff it. I'll just keep learning, and I'll find something to do with it at some point. And I was always doing coaching of people. So in my property maintenance business, I've been coaching people beneath, coming up, in the ranks to overcome certain things and be a certain way and learn certain things about business. Not that I was an expert at it or mega successful at it financially, but I was always really doing decent. And then the coaching idea, somebody put that into my head that you could coach stroke survivors to help them recover from stroke. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. I wonder if that's possible. And because I didn't know what to do with any of this new information, I thought, look, I'm just going to create a podcast. I actually thought of that in the hospital, being wheeled to therapy, which was the most
Wow.
bizarre time. And I spoke about it with Dr. Bradford Burke as well. Like, I spoke to him about it because he thought of writing his book day 2 of his injury. And it's
Yeah, I
like,
remember.
what the hell, man? Like, surely you did more. There's other things to focus on, not how to write a book about your journey that's just started in this most dramatic way, So the podcast in 2015 was just me interviewing other people who had overcome adversity so that I could understand how they did it, so that maybe I could learn from them. And that was really helpful, but it wasn't hitting an audience. It wasn't finding an audience. And I don't know, 2 years down the track, after about 20 episodes, somebody said to me, it should be about stroke. And then it really sunk in. It occurred to me that, yeah, it should be about stroke. And let me rebrand it and change it. And I started interviewing stroke survivors, and they were confirming in me what I thought about stroke recovery. We spoke about the emotional challenges, the challenges that our relationships faced, and our kids and our parents. And I started to not feel alone for the first time in my life. I was like, wow, you guys get me. Like, here's a group of people that get me. And of course, the stroke wasn't really the conversation. This is real life stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And stroke is just the thread that brings us together. And it's like, wow, okay. What I'm finding is people who are like-minded who happen to have a stroke as well. And now that's a really compelling story. That's a really interesting thing for me to do. And what's really cool, the interview I did just before this, which is not out now, is with a lady who's a functional neurologist, or she does functional neurology. I can't remember exactly what the words are, but if you're listening to this episode, it's the one just before. So go and have a look at it if you haven't heard that yet.
I will.
And we had a really deep dive into the global aspect of the recovery, in that it's not just a head that you've got to look at for the recovery. It's not just, oh, that person isn't speaking. What else is going on in the system that might be interfering with that speech? And that's why I asked you, like, is it the fingers not playing the chord, or is it the brain not knowing how to tell the fingers to play the chord, or is it something else? So what I've been able to do is really do a real deep dive into the complexity of stroke recovery. And I don't know much about it yet, because there's no way that I could ever know everything about it. But what I do know informs really great conversations and brings people into a space of thinking that is beyond, you had a stroke, go home, do these exercises, and enjoy your life.
Yeah.
I'm way beyond that. And one of the things that we picked on it and touched on even in the episode before this is about hand-eye coordination and movement after a stroke. And I'll talk about it again, is I spoke about a guy called Ivan who was in therapy with me, who I called Ivan, it's not his real name, and he had to pick up a toilet roll that was empty, and he had to hold it like that with his affected hand. He had to clench it and then move it to the other side of the table, to the other side of his body, put it down and not drop it. But while he was doing that, he was calling his hand a bastard because it wouldn't do what he wanted, right? And he was losing his shit at his hand, calling it a bastard. And of course, the more he did that, the less he was able to complete the task, pick up the toilet roll, place it down, and make sure he didn't drop it. So then, as a coach of other people in other parts of my life, I said to him, well, if your hand did what you wanted it to do and it moved, what would it be? And he said, it'd be my friend. So I said to him, cool, do that. Call your hand your friend at the beginning of the exercise and just see what happens. If anything changes, I don't know, maybe nothing will, but let's see. He goes, all right. So he looks at his hand, he goes, come on, friend. It was no longer than 60 seconds, Vinny. He picks up the damn toilet roll, he moves it to the other side of his body, he puts it upright and he lets it go. And it's like nuts, like everyone went nuts. There
Yeah.
was about 6 of us around this table watching him do that. I think the PTs and the OTs missed the significance of what had just happened.
Exactly.
Right?
Because they're yeah.
Because they're on another sort of level, right? They're thinking about other things. And this guy, I don't know if that lesson stayed in his brain for the next few months or weeks or years of rehab, because I never got to be with him for much longer than about 4 weeks. But that is that's where my understanding of stroke recovery has got to, like that level of nuance where, dude, that word, just the word that you chose, made you breathe differently. It made your blood flow differently. It made oxygen travel through your body differently. It loosened your muscles. It changed your posture. It changed the chemicals in your brain. It changed the chemicals in your butt, your legs, your knees, your arms, your fingers. It did all of that, just that one word. And I've delivered this presentation. I call it words are like weapons. They wound sometimes.
Yeah.
Now that lesson has enabled me to also understand that how my words, which often I get wrong in the wrong context, the wrong people, I use the wrong words, and I piss them off, and I annoy them, and I wound them. So I'm very cognitive. I'm very conscious now that words are like weapons, and they wound sometimes. You know, it's what Cher says in her amazing song, "If I Could Turn Back Time." You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, there's a lesson that can travel across my entire life. One word has a massive impact on both physical, emotional, and mental outputs. And if I use the wrong word in the wrong instance, I wound. So for me, I try not to do that to myself, and I try not to do it to other people. And when I stuff up and do that to other people and say the wrong shit, I apologize. I apologize more than I've ever apologized. But now I know why I'm apologizing. Now I'm not just doing the whole, sorry, man. I'm actually properly apologizing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have continued, well, all of my students, have been gracious enough to continue their lessons with me. I've always taught my whole life, and I didn't know at the point that I came back from the West Coast, I didn't know what I had to offer them. I really didn't know what I had to offer them, but they were adamant about continuing to work with me. And I teach a groove class, a class that is all about learning how to make people have fun with music. it's about grooving. It's not about chops. It's not about, dexterity, technique, or whatever. It's about grooving, and that's it. And that class wouldn't let me take a week off. They said, "No, come on, Benny, we're with you. We're doing this together. Come on." And that teaching aspect has, and with all my students, it's just been a big part of the therapy, and I think that is the same for you. I mean, just that alone, just that one lesson that you described with the roll of toilet paper, that can go so far for anybody. It doesn't matter if you've had a stroke or not.
Mhm.
And I can picture myself in my practice room, my studio here, with my guitars all around me, just cursing like you wouldn't believe, trying to get this passage out even before the stroke, but now even more so. I'm like, you can't imagine the curse words that come out of me. Just, I try to make them. As a matter of fact, I'm writing my anthem. It'll be called Stroke of Genius. And that's the concept of it. The
Yeah,
concept is that we take the words, they affect us, and they affect the people that we say them to. And when we own that, that's when it gets real. That's when we can put it into practice.
that's it. And it's about owning it because look, I come on here and people put me on a pedestal. They think I'm an expert in something. And I don't know shit from clay about anything. Let's be honest. But all I know is that I'm putting into practice what I've learned, and that's all. I'm just trying to practice and get better at my daily existence and my life in every aspect. And I'm very aware of when I'm not being better. I know because it doesn't feel right everywhere. And I can't convince myself like I used to in the past that, that's irrelevant or that doesn't matter. I can't do that anymore. I can't lie to myself. My body knows and it gives me feedback and I cannot not pay attention to it. I have to pay attention to it. So I I share this wisdom and the wisdom of my guest in the hope that it's going to trigger something for somebody else down the track and they'll remember it when it's necessary. And
Yeah.
together, these conversations become this practice that I'm doing. It's a practice of conversation. It's a philosophy, and I'm reading books on philosophy, and I'm just trying to understand what they were about. And all they were about was just they questioned everything. And that's all
Yeah.
I'm doing. I'm just questioning everything and trying to, you know, not lose my temper. And when I do, I just question why I did. I'm not giving myself a hard time about it. And I apologize to myself as much as I apologize to my kids and my wife and the people who I gave a hard time to. And I try and make arguments last less, not as long as they used to. And you know how they sometimes go into the next day and the next day. I try not to do that anymore. I try to bring them down to that, just the 1 hour of the argument and move on. But I'm not an expert at it. I get it wrong a lot. And sometimes if the other person said something that's wounded me, well, now I'm learning how to overcome those wounds quicker if I can, But I'm not perfect at it. If I've had a bad night's sleep or if I've had a really tough day or whatever, I'm human. I'm the same as I always was. Um, but I'm using what the stroke did to me as a opportunity to learn more about life
Yeah.
because I can't be as stupid as I was before the stroke because that led to stroke. That led to disease. And I don't want to be that stupid anymore. I want to be a bit
Yeah.
smarter than that.
Yeah. You know, my grandfather used to tell us that doctors are practicing medicine. When you see their business card, it will say practicing medicine. in some way, shape, or form. At least it did back in the, when he was coming up and when he was learning. So I always thought there was a parallel between musicians and doctors. There was, this idea that it's a constant practice. We'll never get to the point where we've achieved, this idea of being a genius. No, it's a path. It's a journey, and it's about enjoying that journey and in that practice. I laugh when I hear musicians tell me that they hate practicing, because there's a lot of them that are great musicians that have said that. Because, first of all, I point out to them that's not really true, because when I send you a piece of music and you come to the gig extremely prepared and play it better than I ever could have imagined it be played, you have practiced it, even though you say you haven't.
Mm.
And well, that's different, they say, but it isn't different. And I think that idea of everybody is just practicing, and the acceptance of that,
Mm.
is really what we have to learn.
I feel that medicine's lost its way a little bit. And I love what you say, because now the business card has all their accomplishments at university. And it's like,
Right.
dude, like, I don't give a shit about all of the university accomplishments. I want to know how you applied what you learned into your daily life. And
Right.
not just in your office, in every aspect of your daily life. If you're coming to work shitty because you just had an argument with your wife and you're about to open my head up and do surgery on it, I want to know that that argument with your wife is not going to impact that surgery.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Like, this is a practice, and you're telling me about all the letters at the end of your name because of the qualifications that you've achieved. They don't mean anything unless you're able to show that you've grown and developed as a human being while obtaining all of these letters at the end of your name, and seeing all the people that you've seen and done all the things that you've said you've done. Whereas, musicians are still musicians. They're raw. They do what they've always done. They practice, they get up on stage, they perform, and they give their heart and soul in some way, shape, or form. And their words are always an expression of what's happening inside of them, whether it's in their emotions or their head or their gut or wherever it is. That's what we get to see and hear. The visceral sounds from a Metallica, to a classical piece, to whatever. That's, we hear the internal goings on of that musician who wrote that lyric and who performed that song. So I think that medicine has lost its way a little bit. And Dr. Bradford Burke, he was a great example of medicine actually starting to find like what's important about the work that they do. He's writing a book which I wish he'd never had the opportunity to write, because that meant that he wouldn't be in the situation that he's in, right? But the fact that he's in it and decided to write a book about it to help himself and help other people, and now he's learning from life and is applying the life learning to his clients and to his patients. That's a doctor that I want to be involved with. The guy before that, is a really good doctor, but if he hasn't got life experience and if he hasn't applied life learning into his practice, he'll be missing something, and I'll be noticing it, but I won't be able to put my finger on it.
Right. Yeah.
Man, as we come to the end of this episode, because we could keep talking forever, because you're a really interesting and cool dude.
I could keep talking to you forever.
And we'll do it again sometime. I wonder if I could make a request and have you play a piece of music to end this awesome episode?
Well, as I am the way I am right now,
That's it, man. Nothing
I'd
better.
never deny a chance to perform. I don't know what I'll play, but probably something that I wrote, because I don't want you to have to deal with royalty issues. Let
Yes, thank you.
me think, but
Ladies and gentlemen, Vinny Valentino. Mate, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
absolutely, it was a joy. I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thanks so much for joining me on today's Recovery After Stroke podcast. Do you ever wish there was just one place to go for resources, advice, and support in your stroke recovery? Whether you've been navigating your journey for weeks, months, or years, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to get the answers you need. This road is both physically and mentally challenging, from reclaiming your independence to getting back to work, to rebuilding your confidence and more. Your symptoms don't follow a rule book, and as soon as you leave the hospital, you no longer have medical professionals on tap. I know for me, it felt as if I was teaching myself a new language from scratch with no native speaker in sight. If this sounds like you, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone, and there is a better way to navigate your recovery and rebuild a life that you love. I've created an inclusive, supportive, and accessible community called Recovery After Stroke. This all-in-one support and resource program is designed to help you take your health into your own hands. This is your guidebook through every step in your journey, from reducing fatigue to strengthening your brain health to overcoming anxiety and more. To find out more and to join the community, just head to recoveryafterstroke.com. See you next time.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamas. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.